Hey guys, welcome back. So now with us getting into Hulk vs. Thor, Banner of War, the Alpha issue, which is part 1 of 5, heading into this, I've read a lot of you guys' comments on the Hulk videos with Smashed or Not leading right into this, as well as our talks on the recent issues of Thor that head into this as well. And I get that a lot of you guys are kind of like, Hulk vs. Thor, here we go again. And understandably so, but for this one, aside from it being a 60-year anniversary for the both of these guys, with it celebrating the 60-year mark for Thor's Journey into Mystery, issue 83, as well as the Incredible Hulk issue 1, with both issues releasing in 1962, and it makes this matchup more of a mashup of the celebration, as well as an update to how these guys measure up with both of their recent power updates. But with that being like the headliner of this event, throughout the course of this, I want to dig deeper into the motivations and the reasoning behind why these guys are fighting from a narrative perspective. So with that said, let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so what we pick up from this one is directly after the conclusion of Smashed or Not from Hulk issue 6, where we've seen Captain Bruce and the Starship Hulk re-enter the astro-dimensional between space, to where at this point he runs into Thor, who brings along his refurbished hammer that we had seen recently in Thor issue 750, with his hammer now having Odin inside of it since Odin couldn't go to Valhalla after his death. But there's a lot more going on here. And initially we get a bit of this rundown from the Watcher, who narrates the majority of this issue since the fight between Thor and the Hulk is taking them from the between space to a number of other locations, and the Watcher is one of the few people who can really follow that, and it's for that reason he's used in this Alpha issue to bring us up to speed for both Thor and the Hulk. And with how this is done, we're pretty much given a run through of Thor Volume 6, with Thor being new to the throne after the War of Realms, to where from there things for Thor just started popping off back to back, from everything with Galactus and the Black Winter, which had then led to Thor seeing the vision of how he was gonna die at the hand of Thanos, which is something that we've seen for Thor throughout Thor Volume 6, that is something that he thinks of quite frequently. But even up to this point now, he doesn't even know how this is supposed to unfold, from Thanos putting the stones in the hammer or even the return of Marvel Zombies. But recently this has been weighing heavy on Thor, especially with him mentioning in issue 750 about how the gods may die and come back, but eventually there comes a moment where that death doesn't just come and go, but it lingers, to the point of where one day, eventually it'll be something more permanent. And again for Thor, this is just one of many things he's been dealing with, because aside from that you have the return of Donald Blake, God of Hammers, the death of Odin, to where now Odin's trapped in his hammer, speaking to Thor, to where up to this point only Thor can hear him, but this has also placed a new issue on Thor's plate, with him needing to figure out what's going on recently with someone attacking Valhalla. But as we're told, this is where Banner of War crosses through with Thor's story, because after Thor issue 750, Thor had received the word from his ravens about where he can find the Hulk, who as we know the Avengers have been looking for, so that Banner can answer to the incident at El Paso. But with Thor getting this update, he kinda sees it more as a gift, because at this point he just wants something to hit. And in the case of Banner with the Starship Hulk situation, in his case the story is a bit more simple, though we do have a bit more to learn about the specifics, with Banner taking AIM tech along with the help of some unseen magical hand, which right there makes me wonder more about the Starship Hulk's connection to Wonder Gore. But for Banner within his mindscape, he's locked the Hulk away within an engine room so that Captain Banner can not only just control the Hulk by adjusting the levels of this engine room, but really this was Banner trying to get the Hulk as far away from Earth, or really anyone that the Hulk could do harm, which as we've seen, it hasn't been going too well for the guy, because there's been a lot of harm done along the way. But with both their stories leading them up to this point, when their worlds collide, initially we're hit with the idea that Banner wants to get as far away from the world as possible, but Thor's trying to bring him right back. But we're shown rather quickly when Thor tries to reason with Banner and get him to get the Hulk under control, to where then Banner responds, telling Thor to shut up, and he punches Thor through the between space and into this world called Sakren, where we're shown in this case the next level of this conflict as this fight continues, which also in a way gives us the reasoning to why this fight continues. Because when they arrive here in this world, which the Watcher would describe as a wretched planet filled with disease-plagued, warmongering cannibals that devour the eyes of their young to appease their all-knowing pain god. It smells of cotton candy and puppy paws, and the pain god is always happy. And when I seen this, I was like, man, did Shudder buy Adventure Time? Like, did I miss something? Because I mean, if they did, I would definitely watch this cartoon for research purposes. But it then had me thinking like, man, like Donnie Cates, he keeps throwing stuff out there that could potentially turn into its own thing. But with the two of these guys arriving here, it's here that we see again that on both ends, that they both have this internal conflict that's brewing, which for each of these guys is kind of new territory recently. Because on Thor's end, you got Odin speaking to him through the hammer, telling him what he needs to do. And for Bruce, you got Betty, air quotes, who's talking to him and telling him how this isn't gonna pan out well. So when this happens and both of these guys respond out loud to the voices that's in their heads, and right away they kind of just pause and look at each other like, what? Who are you talking to? And when neither one of them answer the other's question, they just go right back to fighting. But at this point, Thor calls for Sif to take the two of them somewhere else where they can actually fight and no one else can be harmed. Because Thor is not familiar with this area. He believes that these creatures or these people are harmless, and he doesn't want them to suffer as a casualty to this fight between him and the Hulk. But with what we know from the Watcher's narration, Thor and the Hulk probably should have stayed here and just beat each other with these guys. But it's here where Sif opens the bifrost and she sends these guys to the Black Hand of God, which, like we had seen in Thor Volume 6, this location goes by many names, and different people of different languages will call it different things. But as soon as they arrive here before the Watcher and a countless number of others, the bout is announced as the Golden Avenger, the Thunder King, the Mighty Thor, versus Green Scar, the indestructible Immortal Hulk. And with how it's done, it's presented to us like a video game. But I gotta say, whoever it is that works at the Black Hand of God that updated this information this quick, as soon as these guys dropped in here, that guy needs a raise. Because the moment these guys touched down, these producers were just ready to go. And I mean, they might have gotten a heads up from the Watcher, because Uatu, he's just known for leaking information, so that could be a thing too. But from here with Thor just telling Banner 17, and initially with Banner hearing that, like 17, he doesn't know what Thor is talking about. But Thor tells him that it was 17 people who the Hulk had killed in El Paso, and it's for that reason that at this point, after Thor had attempted to reason with Banner, that at this point Thor believes that he has to end Banner because the Hulk has crossed the line for the last time. And with saying this, Thor, he had placed Mjolnir on Banner's back, which is more or less like putting a boot on the starship so Banner can't go nowhere. But Thor also lets Banner know that he's not going to celebrate in this glory, but instead Thor sees this as himself doing something that needed to be done. Like they both knew this moment would come. But from here, Banner sends up the engine room to level 8 and he equips himself with a full haptic suit, which, mind you, like keep in mind, like with the haptic suit, Banner is from here feeling everything. But because Banner knows that the Hulk has fought Thor and beaten Thor before, he switches to this method so that he can have the control, so that this time, instead of just fighting harder, he can fight smarter. And one of the first things that Banner does here, since the history of the Hulk fighting Thor are in the Hulk's memories, he just downloads all those memories from all those fights from every time the Hulk has fought Thor into himself so that he can use it against Thor. And as soon as he does this, with the Starship Hulk laying there with Mjolnir on its back and Thor just looking at him like, no, don't you dare. But Banner just gets up, letting the hammer tear straight through his back and out of his torso, which at this point, for everybody who's watching over at the Black Hand of God, like watching this happen, for many of them, this is the greatest push-up they've ever seen, live in living color. And when Banner does this, man, towering over Thor, he just tells Thor, pick up your hammer. And Thor just like, alright, kind of like, oh, this what we doing? And he calls for the hammer and it flies through the Hulk. And from there, the Hulk's like, where were we? But with the engine room being cranked up to 8, and Banner now running things via his haptic suit, and again, feeling all of this. But from here, he starts to wreck Thor, and it's pretty bad. But at this point, with Odin telling Thor through the hammer to get up, and Thor's like, I'm trying. And from there, Odin takes off like, fine, must I do everything? But when Odin takes off and comes back, breaking the sound barrier, he comes back down, totally wrecking this place, which from here gives Thor the upper hand. And it sends them both crashing right through the layers of this arena. But as they make their way down here, Odin tells Thor that when he struck Banner, he felt something. And Thor told Odin like, yes, I feel it too, like the Hulk is possessed. But Odin's like, no, it's not like he's possessed, but it's more like he's haunted. So when they reach the bottom, Thor tells Banner like, okay, if you won't listen to me, perhaps you'll reason with this. Perhaps you'll listen to this. As he lets the hammer fly right into Banner's face, to where then Banner calls for evasive maneuvers, almost as if at this point he's done with the whole haptic idea. But as the hammer hits Banner in the head, and he's knocked out of his haptic suit. It's here where we see Odin step into the mind of Banner through his display, telling Banner that he's gonna have a word with him. And really, with seeing this, I can't wait to find out where this goes, because I believe that though on the surface the whole Starship Hulk as well as the Hulk versus Thor idea have both been getting some mixed feedback lately, but to me I believe that it's things like this that just set up the even crazier moments. Because with us knowing that the Starship Hulk is a mixture of technology and magic, like just imagine what the conversation between Odin and Banner could potentially go. And to me, that's the more exciting thing about this series so far. Because aside from the huge headliner of Hulk versus Thor, there's yet so much more that we've got to dive into as far as what's going on here. Alright, so initially when we jump in here, we start off at Avengers Mountain, with Tony Stark showing the Avengers and the Fantastic Four that he's located the Hulk within this blood sport arena buried within the deepest reaches of uncharted space. That's a location known as the Black Hand of God. And with Tony showing this to everyone, he kinda takes a moment to more or less fill the shoes as lead genius in the room, because when Reed Richards sees this, he's more or less like, what am I looking at? And when Tony shows him this place and tells him what the Black Hand of God is, and that it's the severed hand of a celestial, and all this information just has Reed Richards, one of the smartest people in the Marvel universe, at a loss for words. And Tony finishes Reed's sentence telling him like, yeah, it's awesome. But when Reed lets Tony know that he was actually going to say that it's terrifying, he then asks Tony, is he sure that the Hulk is there, and how did Tony even find this place? And it's here where Tony tells Reed that he has a network of deep space satellites slaved to his internal mainframe where they constantly sweep for activity in places explored and not explored. And it was just yesterday that his network picked up a sound. And with Reed hearing this, he's like, a sound? In space? But Tony cuts him off before Reed can even finish, because again, Tony's having a moment here. But Tony tells Reed that this sound was so loud that the vibrational frequency knocked out one of his satellites. So from there he triangulated the source of the sonic disturbance, and Tony's like, you know what it was, Reed? It was a voice. It was a voice so loud that it blew a satellite out of the sky from 2,000 miles away. And guess what it said, Reed? Guess what it said? No, listen. It said, Hulk smash. And with hearing this, of course, Reed is just blown away, because even though Tony has some extraterrestrial experience, like we'd seen in 2013 Guardians of the Galaxy, or even as far back as Iron Man Volume 1, issue 142, which at that time was really Iron Man just finding a super huge Roxxon satellite. So with Reed hearing this, he tells Tony like, no disrespect, but this is impressive. Because he wasn't aware that Tony had the resources or the scientific know-how to even pull this off. And it's right there where Tony just tells Reed like, yeah, you know what? I don't. Because the truth is, Thor's Ravens told Tony where the Hulk was at, much like what we'd seen before with the Ravens telling Thor where he could find the Hulk. But at this point, with everyone being caught up on the Hulk's location, but also they're aware that Thor is out there and he's already engaged with the Hulk. So with knowing this, Captain America, he's like, okay, we'll wait and see what resolution Thor comes to, and once we have more intel, then we'll make a move. And Captain Marvel, she completely agrees, and mainly because of the situation in El Paso, that was like the final straw that, like, if nothing else, it showed them that they gotta be more honest with themselves about what the Hulk is capable of. But with Tony hearing this, he's kind of like, yeah, no, I'm gonna fight him. Which initially just had me like, okay, yeah, of course you are, Tony. But with Tony saying this, he lets Cap know that back when the Hulk attacked him at Wundagore, he looked into his eyes, and Tony knows without a doubt that the Hulk was going to kill him. Matter of fact, he tried to kill him, which we saw when Tony brought out multiple Hulkbusters, and Banner was just smashing through each one with no discretion or even the slightest bit of care if Tony was inside of it or not. So with Tony saying this and letting Cap and the others know that he's going after the Hulk, to me it just seems like so much more than Tony just wanting a rematch, but rather much like we talked about back in King in Black, with the idea of Tony still holding on to insecurities from Secret Invasion. And this really has me thinking that we're seeing that again, because Tony doesn't just want the Hulk stopped for the sake of everyone's safety, but it's almost like deep down he has to be the one to do it. And with him seeing that look in the Hulk's eye, that look that is willing to kill, as well as the Hulk's recent physical changes, and Tony believes that with his recent project that he has something ready to go up against that. But while Tony's talking to Cap, between every other sentence he's saying things like initiate launch sequence and thrusters at full capacity, and it has Cap like, Tony, are you even here? And Tony's just like, I'm never at these meetings. To where from there we see Tony just take off from a different location in his new toy in order to make his way over to the Black Hand of God. But at this time, within the command deck of the Starship Hulk, we pick back up with Odin, who's made his way into Banner's mind with the intention of Odin speaking to Banner. But right off the bat, Odin lets Banner know that more or less Odin is no man of science, but he assumes that if Odin has to kill Banner in here to bring this monster down, then Odin will do what he has to do. But with Odin leading this conversation with a punch to Banner's face, Banner just quickly puts Odin in restraints, and he tells Odin that he's nothing but a ghost. And regardless to how powerful Odin is, he's in Banner's mind right now. And Banner tells Odin, you might be powerful, but in here, I'm God. And right then with Banner having Odin in restraints, he initiates the Starship Hulk auto defenses, which from there just rain fire on Thor's face. But right in this moment, both Banner and the Starship Hulk take a huge hit, with Odin catching a hit on Banner just after he had given the Starship auto defense command, while at the same time on the outside, Thor headbutts the Starship Hulk, which tosses Banner and Odin on the inside, causing Banner to hit his head, which from here unlocks a memory that Banner had thought he'd locked away. And when Banner comes to, it doesn't take him long to realize that they're back in El Paso, which for us, for the longest time, it's been a mystery as far as what exactly happened here. But as we're taken back to this moment through this memory, it's given to us as a reenactment, and I love that now with us finally seeing what happened in El Paso, that it ties directly into the Immortal Hulk. Because while Banner and Odin are watching this, Banner tells Odin that prior to this point, that him and the Hulk, they faced the devil and walked away. They survived. They forgave each other, and they decided to see the world in a new way, which like we'd seen in the conclusion of Immortal Hulk, that's where it ended, with Banner and his identities seeming to be in a place of harmony. And this is what brought them to El Paso with the intention of saving the world together, because Banner knew that there had been reports of something killing people along the border, so he had been spending time here in order to track that monster down and stop it. And it's here where Odin's like, okay, so you were in this bar, and that monster showed up, and that's where everything went left. But Banner was like, no, he never saw that monster. It never showed up, but something else did. And it's here where we see Banner, who takes a seat at the bar and he's looking up information on his laptop, and a guy sits next to him and he knocks his drink over on Banner's laptop. And initially Banner's upset, but he doesn't Hulk out, but instead he apologizes to this guy and he offers to do like, Banner offers to buy him another drink. But then quickly Banner notices that his rage, or the Hulk's rage, is bleeding over to this guy as well as everyone else in the bar, which again is something that we'd seen over in the pages of the Immortal Hulk. Though at the time it was slightly different, because even back then we would see moments to where the rage of the Hulk would spill over to the Avengers or the UFOs, though at that time it was only the rage itself. But at this point, after the conclusion of Immortal Hulk, with Banner leaving that series in a very harmonious state, but even with this state being a much better one, his side effects have seemed to have gotten an upgrade too, because this time around with the rage that Banner is emitting, it's now causing everyone at this bar to Hulk out. And when that happened and everyone at the bar started attacking Banner, calling him puny Banner, and the next thing Banner knew, his eyes had just blacked out. And during this time, it was like Banner was trapped in his own body and he couldn't stop himself from punching through guys' chests, slamming heads into the bar, biting cheeks, facial cheeks, and literally just tearing these guys to pieces. But as he tells Odin what's happening here, he lets him know that this thing that took over Banner, it made him watch the whole thing. It wouldn't let him blink, and even though Banner could hear himself telling these people to run and to get out of there, but it was only drowned out by the bones breaking, bottles smashing, and the pure chaos that was underway. But with this then taking us back to that moment where Banner was outside just watching this bar go up in flames, and it's here where Captain Banner tells Odin that this is the moment when he realized, even after beating the devil, that the fury inside of him could not be tamed, which is what then led Banner to using the combination of science and magic to create the Starship Hulk so that he could use it the same way that it has used him. But with Odin seeing this, he asked Banner, how did you build all of this? There are great magics at work here, which for us, like, this is the question that we have been dying to know as far as who helped Banner with the magic side of all this. But before we can get that answer, the ground starts to shake and lightning starts to shoot throughout this memory, because in this very moment Thor has called the hammer back, disconnecting the Odin projection and pulling Odin out of Banner's mind. But before we go forward and just move on from this El Paso memory, I also want to point out that we've seen this moment before, with Banner watching these flames, wishing that he was inside, dying with the rest of those guys in the bar, because we saw him talk about this part of the incident back in Hulk issue 3. Because had this moment continued to have played out from the perspective of Banner, it's likely that we would have also seen what Banner saw in his mind when the Titan Hulk showed up and Banner asked, why did you do this? And the Titan Hulk was just like, because you were weak, boy, and he just popped Banner's head. But instead, like with Odin getting pulled out early, Banner didn't get to tell Odin more, and we can tell with how this is done that Banner wanted to tell Odin more. But with Thor calling back the hammer, he had no indication of what was going on the inside, so Thor just had no clue that Odin was making progress. So with Odin telling Thor that he needs more time, and Banner still on the inside yelling for Odin to come back, and it's like, man, we were so close to getting those magic questions answered, which is something I guess we'll have to wait for either part 3 or somewhere else in this series. But if I had to guess, I'm just guessing that it's someone who uses chaos magic. Just throwing that out there. But with Banner screaming for Odin to come back, he's trying to tell him that the Hulk doesn't know that he's not in a simulation. And that's where we find out how exactly the auto defenses are set up, with it pretty much being the Hulk on the inside, believing that he can go full kill mode on whatever comes out in front of him. Because before, the things that the Hulk would see in the engine room, they were just ridiculous. Some of it familiar, but for the most part, ridiculous. But with Hulk in that engine room, from issue 1 of Hulk, he's known that he's in the engine room. And the Hulk is known from the beginning that everything that shows up in here, he can absolutely cut loose on, because they're not actually here, and the simulation is only producing what Banner wants to be in the engine room and how Banner wants it to be there. But now with the autopilot pretty much just placing the Hulk in full control, snapping him from the engine room into reality, to where now the first thing that the Hulk sees is this bright light with Tony Stark descending as Mecha Celestial Titan Buster Iron Man, and you can just imagine that the Hulk is looking at this like, oh, this is ridiculous too, because there's no way that what he's seeing, what we're looking at, is the real deal. Which is the messed up part, because this is all very real. And if the Hulk really unleashes and goes full Titan and kills Iron Man, then that death is going to be real too. Because in this moment with the Hulk in control, he does not know that this is not a simulation. And I don't blame the Hulk for thinking that it is, because Celestial Mecha Iron Man is looking crazy right now, and I'm digging it a lot. But it sucks for Tony that the Hulk is still in murder mode, thinking that this is just another level where he needs to kill everything. Alright, so with us jumping back in and picking right up from Iron Man arriving in his Celestial Gundam Hulkbuster, and his hero right away, we quickly jump over to Bruce Banner in his own mindscape as he watches this burning light come down and crash on him. And for Bruce, with this happening and him once again just not in control at all, but with him seeing this fire crash down, it brings him to tears, and not because of what he's experiencing on the inside, but instead because he feels sorry for everyone on the outside, with the amount of rage that's about to be unleashed. And like we had seen in the previous Thor issue, at this point the Hulk is fully in control, but he has no idea that this is not another one of those ridiculous simulations from the engine room, to where in there he knew that he could just tear through everything and leave no survivors because none of it was real. And at this point, with the Hulk not knowing the difference and still thinking that he's in there, this sets us up for a couple things. Because for one, the Hulk thinks that he doesn't have to hold back, but also with this extreme amount of fire that he's under, because he believes that he's still in the engine room, the Hulk also believes that this is coming from Banner. But it's also here where we find that pretty much everybody has left the Black Hand of God. Like, they've either gotten in their ships and taken off, or Sif has pulled them out of there with the bifrost and just sprinkled them across the galaxy in a safer location, because apparently there were a group of onlookers here who weren't trying to get out. Like, they were either trying to collect their winnings, or they were trying to stick around and see how this panned out. But it's here where we find that the Black Hand of God is completely deserted for the first time in millennia, leaving no witnesses, no onlookers, no watchers, and no one to observe what comes next, except Thor, who of course is accompanied by Odin inside of the hammer. But with Tony unleashing this just insane attack on the Hulk, we come to find out that it's a bit more than Tony just attacking the Hulk. Because for Tony, with him turning this celestial body into a Hulkbuster armor, he very much designed this thing with the intention of draining gamma radiation from the Hulk, so that the Hulk would turn back into Banner and they could just take Banner in. Which right away sounds like World War Hulk issue 5, when we had seen the Tony Stark satellites equipped with beams that would nullify gamma radiation. Because at that time when Hulk turned back into Banner after fighting the Sentry, after that he had just hulked out again when Rick Jones died. And back at that time with Tony using that satellite, this was the last measure at the conclusion of World War Hulk that kept the Hulk from literally breaking the world. But now at this point, with Tony using the Celestial Gundam version of this same method, though he's trying to help Banner, that doesn't negate the fact that the Hulk is experiencing pain that no other human could imagine. And the Hulk doesn't even know why. But in this moment, the Hulk is experiencing the celestial judgment of 100,000 exploding stars. And I imagine that Tony doesn't know how this feels, so he just keeps going, hoping that the Hulk will get smaller and power down. But of course, like we know, things have changed since World War Hulk, and as a result of Tony using this similar attack, the Hulk's gamma radiation just starts increasing, which then makes the Hulk start to go into Titan Hulk territory. But before that happens, Tony's Celestial Hulkbuster takes a hit, which come to find out caused Tony to sustain a broken collarbone and multiple broken ribs, which then made the suit kick in the Celestial self-healing protocols, which is pretty cool. I hope that comes standard with every Iron Man suit from now on. But then again, I'm not sure how much of that self-healing includes Tony's body along with the suit. But when Tony looks up, he realizes that he was knocked down by Thor's hammer. But as it turns out, there are a couple things that are going on here, because even though Thor was watching the Hulk just take that slaughter from Tony's celestial Hulkbuster, which had caused Thor to think for a moment like this is too much. But even with this being the case, it was the hammer. It was Odin who had taken Tony down. And with this happening, Thor takes the time to approach Tony and tell Tony that it was the hammer and it wasn't himself, it wasn't Thor. And right away, Tony's kind of like, okay, buddy, how many times you gonna use that one? Like, how many times have we heard, oh, it wasn't I, it was the hammer. It has a mind of its own. Because for Tony, he's like, man, we've done this song and dance a number of times already. And he lets Thor know, like, didn't we just come out of God of Hammers, where we had the lady made out of lightning making the hammer do bad stuff? And with Tony saying this, Odin's trying to tell Thor, because again, at this point, only Thor can hear Odin right now. But Odin's trying to tell Thor to just tell Tony what's going on, with Odin referring to the Hulk being out of control. But instead of Thor telling Tony this, he then tells Tony what he believes to be the more immediate solution, with him letting Tony know that he believes that this time that they have to stop the Hulk for good. But with Thor saying this, it's here where a shadowy figure then starts to come through in the background, which right away just gives me Maestro Namor deja vu. But in this case with the Hulk just dropping 10 toes down on top of Thor, to where then the Hulk just screams out Banner, because once again he believes that this is all a simulation, and he thinks that Banner is just somewhere on the command deck cranking up the engine room to insane levels once again. But with Tony hearing the Hulk just yell Banner, Tony doesn't get it, because there's a lot going on that he's just not aware of. And from here, when Tony just punches the Hulk off of Thor, Banner, who's in his mindscape, is just screaming, trying to tell Tony no, like the Hulk doesn't know that this is actually real. The Hulk thinks he's in a simulation, and the Hulk doesn't realize that he can actually kill you guys. And really with Banner doing this, it feels a lot like if you've ever seen someone who watches TV and they just yell at the screen every time as if the people in the movie can hear them. Like, that's exactly what Banner's doing right now. Because on the outside, the Hulk is only focused on what's in front of him, which at this point, again, Celestial Hulkbuster Gundam to the Hulk. Facing this thing, it doesn't look like reality, which is why it makes sense that the Hulk is just convinced that it's not. But then it's here while Tony is just giving it all he's got, and the Hulk is just taking it and coming for him. But it's during this time that Odin tells Thor, like, boy, you don't listen, let me go. And with doing so, Odin just slams the hammer on top of the Hulk, telling the Hulk to calm down because he's not here for him, but instead he's here to talk to Dr. Banner. But with seeing this happen, it's kind of interesting just seeing the different things that Odin can do, given his current state. But man, as soon as the Hulk hears the name Banner, the rage kicks up another notch, and it's here where we get the return of the Hulk eye lasers, which is something just totally new to these guys. And for Tony, this is just another thing going in the complete opposite direction of where he expected this to go. But on top of us seeing the Hulk shoot his eye lasers again, it's here where we then see this circle of gamma fire forming around the Hulk as his rage just gets crazier. And it's here with Thor seeing this that Tony tells Thor that he's getting some crazy gamma readings that are like melt an entire city skyline level. And it's here with Tony trying to tell Thor that that's not just rage, that he needs to get out of there. But in this moment with Thor going for his hammer, trying to get his father, and Odin refusing to let up, telling Thor that he can get through to Banner, and this just places Thor with his hammer at ground zero, with the Hulk saying Hulk free and just going mega nuclear as he lets out this gamma explosion on this nearby planet beneath the Black Hand of God that is the equivalent of 3,000 gamma explosions, with an insane amount of gamma radiation and thunder just going everywhere. Which from here for Tony, this completely just wrecks his celestial Hulkbuster. But also in this moment, it feels like Tony's been dropped into an episode of Love, Death, and Robots. Because it's here where we see him exit the celestial Hulkbuster, and he's more or less trying to put together like what just happened. And at first he calls for Thor, to where he gets no response, and then he tells his AI, which is called Boss, like, talk to me, tell me that I'm not trapped alone without a battle bot on a dying planet with a super Hulk. Which again, this would be a great introduction to a Love, Death, and Robots episode, and the Marvel version, of course. But it's here where Boss tells Tony that the celestial tech had protected him from the gamma bomb explosion, and it also lets Tony know that this was the equivalent of 3,000 gamma explosions. But then it's here where Tony sees a shadowy figure approaching him, which causes him to ask the question, what would happen if a human was caught in 3,000 gamma explosions? And Boss lets him know that that human would be atomized. Which makes sense, because even with the fiction of Banner surviving one gamma explosion and becoming the Hulk, like, that's a stretch. Like, let's be honest. And really anytime we've ever seen anyone survive a gamma explosion in comics, it's kind of like, would you be held together long enough to get powers? Like, let's have a real conversation here. But with Boss telling Tony that 3,000 of these gamma explosions would atomize a human being, with Tony looking at the shadowy figure, he's like, well, what if this person wasn't a human being? What if they were already a god? And it's right here where we find that this mega gamma explosion has caused Thor to Hulk out. And so with this happening, like, we've seen hulked out Thor before, but this time around with him being All-Father Thor and him getting this version of this power from the Immortal Hulk, like, there are a lot of different factors in the play here. And from this point here, I'm just curious to see how this is gonna pick up when we jump back into the Thor series, because this Banner of War is getting out of hand. Alright, so like we'd seen in the previous issue, with Tony and Thor coming after the Hulk in an attempt to take him back to Earth for what happened in El Paso, and really on Thor's end, him trying to end the Hulk, with him believing that the Hulk has passed the threshold of redemption. But either way, with them coming here, this ended badly, with Hulk shooting lasers from his eyes and then going mega nuclear, letting off a blast of 3,000 gamma bombs, of which Tony only survived because he was in the celestial mech Hulkbuster, because otherwise, had he been outside of the suit, he would have been turned into dust just drifting through the spaceways. But like we'd seen for Thor, on the other hand, with him being a god, 3,000 gamma bombs for him was more or less the equivalent to 1 gamma bomb for Banner. But there's also a bit more to it that we'll talk about in a little while, with it turning Thor into the Smash God of Thunder, with the gamma lightning and everything, just looking extra metal. But when he emerges from this dust and comes after Tony, Tony's celestial armor jumps back in, to where again, like we've seen, it has a celestial self-healing protocols, which are what kicked in again here to allow it to step in and save Tony's life. But even still, with it stepping in, Thor is breaking this thing down faster than it can put itself together. And as quick as this armor jumped up, Thor put it right back down, to where then Thor continues to go after Tony, but in this moment, Tony escapes death for the 3rd time in a row, when the Hulk steps in and punches Thor pretty much through a mountain. But when this happens, we also get a second to where Tony's looking at the Hulk and he's asking, like, is he talking to Bruce? But Hulk is just like, no Bruce, because once again, your Savage Hulk is at the wheel. But this moment doesn't last too long before Thor comes back and Hulk tells Tony to run, but Tony doesn't even get a chance to run too far before the impact just tosses him to the side. And from here for a good minute, all we see is just Thor laying into the Hulk, hit after hit, just pounding him into the ground. But then it's from here where we jump back over to the mindscape of Banner, to where, like we'd seen before, Odin has again made his way in, and when he shows up, he tells Banner that he's turned Thor into a Hulk and that Thor's out there killing him. And Odin lets Banner know, like, this is the part where you get up and you help me beat some sense back into him. And Banner agrees, but also this goes along with where Banner is right now, because before, a majority of the time when it comes to the Hulk, Banner's just been along for the ride, until more recent years where we've seen them both cooperate together, or all cooperate in some instances. But after the conclusion of Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk, when it seemed like Banner had finally found a harmony between himself and all the different identities, after all that progress, the incident in El Paso, this took Banner 10 steps back after recently taking 2 steps forward, which is why he converted his physical body into the Starship Hulk, locking your Savage Hulk away in the engine room, because recently for Banner, harmony wasn't enough, working with the Hulks wasn't enough. And in El Paso, when he got a taste of utter helplessness, this took him back to a place that he hadn't been in a long time, and it did it in a much worse way than what we're used to seeing with Banner just hulking out. So when we see Banner here accepting Odin's help, he's trying to get back to the control center, and he tells Odin to do so that he has a big favor to ask. But on the outside with Thor and Hulk just going at it, Tony's trying to land communications back to Avengers HQ in order to get an evac, backup, or something, and I'm pretty sure he wants that evac more than anything else, and I don't blame him. But with him trying to reach out to the other Avengers, no one responds. But instead, what he gets is Sif responding through Thor's Ravens, to where then she opens the Bifrost and gets Tony out of there. And when this happens, initially, like, Tony, he's relieved because he didn't want to be there in that. But then when Sif tells Tony that next she is bringing Thor to Asgard, and then right then Tony's kind of like, I don't think you want to do that. Like, have you seen this guy? But in response, Sif lets Tony know, like, of course she has. She sees everything. And she tells Tony she understands that Thor needs to be stopped and that he's lost. But if anyone's going to stop him or find a solution, then it's going to be his people, and it's going to happen here on Asgard. But when Sif opens the Bifrost on hulked out Thor, he resists. And I gotta tell you, I've never seen this happen before. And with Sif trying to pull him in, she's trying, her nose is bleeding, and then finally, boom, the Bifrost just shatters. And it's like, man, like, okay, we've seen the Bifrost broken before, but man, not like this. Because the Smash God just said nope, and he stood 10 toes down, resisting the Bifrost and shattering the Rainbow Bridge. But also with this happening, Sif can't believe what she's seeing, and she's seen a lot. So for a moment while the rainbow bridge is crumbling, she's just standing there and she says, "Thor, I failed you." And with seeing this, it kind of reminds me of a moment in the beginning of God of Hammers when at the time Thor had more or less told her that if you can't see what I need you to see or carry out what your job calls for you to do, does this mean that I need to relieve you of your sword? And I just imagine that in this moment for Sif, some of this is running back through her mind. And I mean, fortunately Tony was there to pull her back, because otherwise she was just gonna stand there and end up like Loki from the first Thor film or something. But for Sif, with the Bifrost destroyed, in this moment she takes this as a huge failure. And I mean, it's not like another Bifrost can't be built, either by Thor when he goes back to normal, or even by Tony, who could probably pick up the pieces and make something out of it. But for Sif, this hits her in a huge way, and I'm curious to see where this goes next for her. But from here, when we jump back into Banner's mindscape, we see that Odin's even like, man, like Thor's lost it. And when Banner tries to tell Odin that that's not quite the case, and Banner has a plan on how to stop him, and right away Odin's like no, because he doesn't want to help Banner to continue to lose even more of his mind, and Odin makes a suggestion that they subdue Thor. But then it's here where Banner cuts off Odin. He tells him that this is not Thor, but instead this is the Titan Hulk from inside of Banner possessing Thor. And really, this is something that Odin is partially aware of, because in the previous issue we had seen that Odin had got part of the story when he saw what happened in El Paso, when the Titan Hulk possessed all of the people in that bar and infected them with its rage, which again is like an amplified symptom of what we'd seen happen throughout Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk. So it's not like Donny Cates is just completely pulling this one out of the blue. But even like we see in the previous issue, Thor issue 25, which was Banner of War Part 2, just before Odin was pulled out of Banner's mind, through the course of that, Odin had went into Banner's mind already being aware that there was another mysterious factor that was at play. And just before Odin had been pulled out by Thor, Banner was getting ready to tell him, which is why at the time Odin was trying to get back into Banner's mind. But it really isn't until now where Odin's getting the rest of that information as far as who or what it is that Banner's dealing with. But it's here where Banner tells Odin that if he goes toe to toe with Thor out there as the Hulk, like if this continues, then the Titan Hulk will come back out. And when that happens, it's over. Everything. Because earlier when Odin told Banner that Thor's out there killing them, it just shows that Odin doesn't realize that the Immortal Hulk doesn't quite work like that. And it's like now with the addition of the Titan Hulk, it's not even going to get to that point. And so it's here where Banner tells Odin, now that he's filled in, that he gets back to the favor that Banner was asking about. And it's right here where we then see the hammer returning to Thor, only to then break his hand and pass right by him. And at this point we then find that Banner is back in the captain's chair with Odin along beside him, and it's right here where we find what was the plan or what was the favor that Banner had asked of Odin. Because it's here now with Banner back in control that he catches the hammer, strikes it on the ground, and he is transformed into the immortal God of Thunder Hulk. I don't know what to call it, but it looks so good. And when this happens, like a couple things are going on here, because for one, with Banner back at the wheel, this presumably puts off the appearance of the Titan Hulk. And not just with Banner back in control, but with him back in control and Odin at his side. But then also on the outside, in addition, there's the case of this evening the playing field a little bit, with Thor being possessed and getting the Hulk's power, and now the Hulk also getting the power of Thor, which now gives us your hulked out Thor versus your Thored out Hulk. Did I say it right? But you guys get what I mean. Thor with a Hulk upgrade versus Hulk with a Thor upgrade. But man, like with this being the case, the power that these two have individually, it's already nuts. And when the both of them throw their first hit and they clash for the first time, that first blow destroys this planet, which is just ridiculous. Like, this is insane. And seeing this has me thinking a couple things. Like, for one, whenever Tony sees this, he's just gonna be extra glad that he got out of here. But also on top of that, it has me thinking, like, where are these two guys gonna fight? Like, are they just gonna be jumping off pieces of this planet or what? Because the amount of power that both of these guys have in this moment, it is just ridiculous. But even still, I'm ready to see where this goes, because also I'm curious to see how these versions of each of them actually fight. Alright, so for this one, when we jump back in, we really hit the ground running here, because in our last couple of talks, we'd seen how the gamma explosion that came from the Starship Hulk had let off this crazy amount of gamma energy that was powerful enough to turn a god into a Hulk, which upped the stakes on Thor's end by causing him to Hulk out. But also with Odin helping Banner, he had allowed the Hulk to live Mjolnir, which from there once again gave us the Thored out Hulk versus the Hulked out Thor. And right away we were given a tease with the first clash from these two, with the first hit from the both of them just devastating the planet that they were on. And it's from this moment going into the conclusion where we're given this narration from the Watcher, who starts this off with saying that the question is answered at last, the question that's been asked for decades, and if the universe survives this day, then it's something that'll be debated for centuries to come. And really this is one of those things that makes more sense when we get that answer later on in the story, closer towards the end of this conclusion. But also with the way that this is set up, with us having hulked out Thor versus Thored out Hulk, it'll make you think like, okay, like how could we say who would really win if both these guys aren't their original selves and this isn't like a classic match between Savage Hulk and Thor Odinson? Which, by the way, say what you want about some of these old matches, but they definitely had their moments, like the time in Defenders issue 10 when the Hulk grabbed Thor's cape and he yeeked it so hard that Thor got spun and drilled into the ground. Like, to do that, it takes a certain level of disrespect to pull that off. And regardless of how the fight ends, it's moments like this that people still remember, and you can't get back up acting like that didn't just happen. But in this matchup, with them having each other's upgrades, there's a few layers that Donny Cates uses in order to flip this whole thing on its head. And the first part is them being given each other's upgrade, allowing the Hulk to fight with Mjolnir and leaving Thor driven by rage and just fighting with his bare hands, which on paper, it sounds like it's taking away the advantage that one would have over the other, because normally the Hulk couldn't lift Mjolnir. So with giving the two of them a taste of each other's power, and it's almost like Donny Cates is neutralizing the playing field in order to emphasize what is truly different about these two guys. Because at their core, this is still Thor, the god of thunder, the Allfather, versus the Hulk, the strongest one there is, the World Breaker. And really this neutralizing method could have gone either way, like you either turn them both all the way up with giving them each other's powers, or you literally neutralize them by having like Donald Blake versus Bruce Banner, which probably wouldn't have been as exciting unless it was like the actual Donald Blake from Prey who had gone on a killing spree, and us getting him versus Bruce Banner from El Paso. Now that would have made an interesting matchup as well. But again, with this one, there are much deeper layers that are going on here. And we see some of this unfold as Odin tells Banner to get them to Asgard. And of course, Bruce is like, you know, how we gonna do that? The Rainbow Bridge is broken. And it's here where Odin tells Bruce that Thor has often held back the sheer scope of Mjolnir's power. And even with the Bifrost gone, Odin uses this power to get the Hulk and Thor back to Asgard. And as soon as they get there, we expand on this a bit more, because as the Hulk and Thor come crash landing on Asgard, and everyone there sees the Hulk wielding Mjolnir, and it's here where Tony says that Thor has barely beaten the Hulk with Mjolnir in the past. So how is he gonna do it now with the Hulk wielding Mjolnir if he's barely beaten him before? And right away it's here where Beta Ray Bill says that this is not true, because the Hulk has never fought Thor, not the real Thor. And with saying this, I like the way that Beta Ray Bill breaks this down, because he talks about in the past when they fought, the Hulk faced the Avenger, the humble Thor, the noble Thor. But now the Hulk faces not just a mirror of his own rage, but also a rage that has been held back for hundreds of years, because Thor was cast down to Midgard by Odin to learn humility, to learn honor, to learn how to wield his power with mercy. And really this makes me look back on Journey into Mystery issue 83 or Thor First Thunder, which before I've only looked at as different tellings of Thor learning humility and stories of quote unquote Odin vanquishing the pride of Thor's heart. But with the way that Beta Ray Bill expresses it here, like at the time Thor was learning how to show mercy, and in previous matches when Thor had fought the Hulk, Thor believed that there was someone inside of the Hulk that was a man or ally, someone worthy of forgiveness, someone worthy of mercy. But in this moment with Thor being truly unleashed, he doesn't see a man inside of the Hulk, all he sees is the beast, which is along the lines of what we heard Thor say before prior to his Gamma incident. But also this teases the idea of Thor going back to his more primal ways, and not just the case of Thor slipping into Warrior's madness, but I'd also say like a time where it's just Thor, back when visiting Midgard was just new to him, kind of like what we'd seen in Thor Volume 5 issue 7, where Thor would come to Earth, slay a troll, make some friends, and then step out to join a war between the Dark Elves and the Dwarves, to where Thor would fight for 40 years straight. And I'm talking gruesome fights. And he would just lose track of time, cutting off heads and all sorts of limbs. Which again, for Thor, that 40 years for him was just a let me step out and I'll be back kind of thing. No warrior's madness, just young Thor dismembering any opponent who stepped in his way. And it's here where Beta Ray Bill more or less schools Tony, and he tells him, well, if you don't think that Thor stands a chance against the Hulk, watch this. As they continue to fight, and Thor just tears off the Hulk's arm, with Thor not only showing that he's a god and a warrior, but also, like Beta Ray Bill mentioned, Hulk is facing the mirror of his own rage, and that mirror just tore his arm off. But right after this, Odin tells Banner to push Thor towards Yggdrasil so that the World Tree can burn that madness out of Thor and get him back to the way that he was. And as soon as he knocks Thor into the World Tree, it starts to wrap around Thor and bind him up. And it's here where Odin starts to talk to Banner about the rage that fuels his Hulk, and how in Banner's case, he's found a way to cage his Hulk and use his rage as fuel instead of letting it control him. But in the case of Thor, he's not even close to having that level of control. And at this point, with Thor being bound to the World Tree, he's being held with the united power of every realm in the known and unknown universe, with all the voices of the elders whispering to him, guiding him back to the god that he is. And it's also here where Odin says that he doesn't think that this is gonna be enough. And once again, we're talking about the united power of every realm in the known and unknown universe. And Thor just breaks himself free of it. And from here, when Thor turns around and grabs the World Tree, I can't help but see this like a God of War rage moment. You know how Kratos be like, ah! Like, all I could think of was that game in this moment. Kratos with the full rage meter. I'm sorry. But matter of fact, if you know the words to the God of War theme, type them in the comments so that way I can practice. But with Thor grabbing the World Tree, grabbing Yggdrasil, like he's just gotta show what these new gains is about to do. But with him grabbing the World Tree, he then breaks it from the root, snapping Yggdrasil like it was a Kit Kat. And with Thor doing this is no small feat, because the World Tree not only reaches throughout the 10 realms, but multiple times we've also seen references, and even in charts that showed us just the 9 realms, that the root system of Yggdrasil manifests itself on most of the other worlds, across various dimensional separate realms. So quite literally, Allbreaker Thor, I'm just gonna call him Allbreaker now, he's showing the capability of tearing reality apart. And Banner even calls it out by saying if we don't stop this guy, this is the end of reality. And with Banner seeing this, he tells Odin that we gotta talk this guy down. But also notice with Banner saying this is where we get our answer. Because when we saw earlier the Watcher mentioning who would win in a battle to the death between the Hulk and Thor, and really it's here where we find that the answer to that question is no one. Because it's here with Banner and Odin seeing what Thor is capable of with Banner's rage, as well as Odin recently being made aware of the new hulking issues that Banner is dealing with at the moment, and the both of them realize that if they let these two guys just fight unchecked, because Thor and Hulk have proven that they're both physically strong enough now to break reality, and Odin knows that no mortal being in the universe would survive that. And granted, in the case of the Hulk, it would take time for him to reach reality breaking levels, but nonetheless, the amount of destruction that would take place in the wake of this battle, all mortal life and countless realities would just cease to exist. And if everyone's dead and Hulked out Thor and Thored out Hulk just keep fighting, then who's the winner? And this is what Banner and Odin realize, because the Hulk could continue to combat Thor, one arm and everything, die and come back, and just go back and forth over and over again. But the cost of making that choice is too great. And it's here where Banner's like, no, we've got to talk this guy down. And Odin, he hears that and he's like, he just goes for it. And with him being inside of Banner's mind, he speaks through the Hulk to his son Thor, and Odin just opens up. He starts off telling Thor that he's sorry, and not just for Thor's troubles, but also for the part that Odin has played in it as well. And this is something that's been a long time coming. And recently we talked about some of this tension when we were getting into God of Hammers, but the broken relationship between Thor and Odin, it goes back so much further. Because Odin knew that someday Thor would be king, but no matter what Thor would do, it was like he could never do right in the eyes of Odin. And we got another example of this back in Thor Volume 5 when Jason Aaron had showed us a different example of how this had played out. Because at the time, before the Donald Blake lesson, Odin had a problem with Thor going to Midgard too much. And he chastised Thor, telling him he was neglecting his duties as the Prince of Asgard, while also telling Thor that he's the god of the storm, not the mud. And just as one example, it was like one minute Odin would think Thor was too humble, and the next moment he'd think Thor was not humble enough. And it was very rarely for Thor where he could remember a time where he could think of a good father-son moment, which is what we then later saw during God of Hammers, with Thor recently becoming king and beginning to look back on moments with his father when he then remembered that there were times when Odin did show him love. And it really feels like all of this has just been building up to this moment. And recently going into this with Odin making his way into Mjolnir, this started like Odin was gonna make the same mistakes again. But it's here where Odin realizes and admits that he had messed up. And what Thor really needs now is for an Allfather to do what Allfathers are supposed to do, and that's help their sons with their burdens. And it's here where Odin uses the magic within Mjolnir to remove the gamma from Thor and restore the World Tree, which from there just causes this massive explosion that knocks everybody back. And afterwards, when we catch up with Tony, who's asking Thor about what happened, it's here where we find Thor tell Tony that only a god could survive being that close to the blast, and as a result, the Hulk's dead. And really with Tony hearing this, in his mind he knows that Thor's capping, but he doesn't go back and forth with Thor. Instead, Tony's just more or less like, wow, that's crazy. And he borrows Thor's goat so he can get back to Midgard. But we also find out with Odin using this blast from Mjolnir to restore Thor and repair the World Tree, that in the case of Banner, he restored the Starship Hulk and he just took off from there, continuing his travels much like we'd seen in issue 1. But also in this moment, we find out from Thor as he has a conversation with Sif, where Thor tells her the reason why he had lied to Tony, saying that Banner the Hulk is dead, because it's here where Sif asks Thor if he was sure about letting Banner go. And it's here where Thor expresses what I believe is the final layer of what this fight was showing us, because it's here where Thor says that Banner's not to blame for what happened in El Paso. And he also knows that Banner can't just go back to Earth just yet, because he tells Sif that he's lived behind Banner's eyes. He's felt his rage, he's felt his pain. And it's almost like with the both of these guys having each other's power, that they both got the opportunity to experience each other's struggle. And Thor lets Sif know that he's learned through this experience that he now realizes that he shares more in common with the Hulk than he would wish. And I'm sure a lot of it for the both of them is centered around daddy issues. But with Thor learning this and him and Banner really just looking at each other before Banner left, it kind of gives us the indication that Banner had learned a bit about Thor too. But with Banner leaving and going off into his interdimensional travels, we also get another indication that these lessons are not over. Because back on Asgard, we see the Hulk's Thor armor right next to the Destroyer, and with a delivery that kind of feels like a Marvel mid-credit scene, we then see the eyes of the Titan Hulk light up inside of his armor, which from there ends Banner of War, but it also lets us know that the solution that Odin had came to fix Banner's problem with the Titan Hulk, that now it's a problem that's just sitting dormant on Asgard. And I use the word dormant loosely, because the Titan Hulk, he can just pop off any day. Who knows when that's gonna happen? And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.